Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to another Python tutorial video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove missing values or handling missing values in Python. And that's a very important step when you are doing your pre-processing in your database for any machine learning or data science tasks that you want to do. That's probably the first thing you need to clean your data. And one part of the data cleaning is removing missing values or basically handling not non-values. So I'm going to open a new Python notebook here. Um, and we are going to use Jupyter Online Notebook for this tutorial. One of the first things that you need to do before importing or before starting this tutorial is importing two libraries. They are called Pandas and NumPy. If you're not familiar with these libraries, you probably need to check other Python tutorials that I will be discussing about these libraries. But for now, we want to import pandas as PD and import numpy as np. And we're going to use specific functions from each of these libraries to build this example or build an example data frame or data table to show how we can handle missing values. So what we are going to do is we're actually creating a table or a data frame that has 3 columns and 3 rows. And for that, we need to define a data frame. So df, our data frame, is going to be equal to importing or creating the data frame. For that, we need to call the data frame function from pandas, so pd.dataframe, and make sure you are paying attention to the naming in Python, because if you write data frame like that or like this one, it's case sensitive and it's not going to give you the correct function as you're using these specific functions or libraries in in Python and specifically in Pandas. So opening the data frame here, and for this example data frame, we're going to define again 3 columns. The first column we're going to call it vehicle types. So we will call the name of the first column as vehicle column. And then opening the brackets for the values in that column. The first column is going to be just different types of vehicles, and we're going to call that, for example, bus. This is going to be the first row. The second row is going to be truck, again, another type of vehicle. And the third one is going to be bicycle. That's, again, we're just trying to build an example here to show how we want to handle this database. This is a pretty small data frame, but it can be applied, all the methods and functions that we're going to use here can be applied to big databases with thousands of rows of data. Now, the second column, we are going to call it location for this example again. And this can be the location of, for example, accidents on different streets or highways by different types of vehicles like buses or trucks or bicycles. For the second column, the location can be either, let's say, street. So we're going to type in street, the name of the street for this example, or highway. Now, before that, we're going to insert an intentional non-values here, not a number value here. And for that, we're going to call a function from NumPy that's called none. So it's going to be np.none will give us a not a number value for the first row. And the second and third row are going to be streets and highway, just different locations of in our imaginary database. Now the third column, we're going to call it time, and this can be the time of the accident, for example, in this example. Now in this column, we're going to insert two different non-values, or in this specific example, NAT values. For the second one, for the first one, we're going to put pd.nat. That's going to give us an NAT value for the first row. The second row, we're going to call it a timestamp. Again, there's another function in Pandas called timestamp. So pd.timestamp will give us that format, and then we're going to insert again a date. Let's say 21 of October of 2018. And then for the third row, we're going to insert another missing value or NAT. So we're going to repeat that pd.nat for the third row. And that should be pretty much our data frame or data table. So we're going to close the square bracket, the curly bracket, and also the parentheses. And so once you have your data frame, you need to just print your data frame to make sure that it's running perfectly. Once we have this line of code ready, we're going to go ahead and run it and see what happens. Now, the error that you can see here, you see that the code did not run completely, and there's an error here. The error, if you read the last line of the error, it says that there's no attributes in Pandas as timestamp. And again, I did that on purpose to show you that if what happens if you're not following the exact uppercase and lowercase format in the functions from these libraries, and that's not gonna just give you the correct answer. Once we take care of that, we can see that a data frame is created, 3 columns by 3 rows. Again, on the first column, we have different types of vehicles. The second column, we have an intentional non-value and 2 other locations. And in the third column, we have 2 missing values, NATs. And on the second row, we have a date as a value here. Now we want to see if this is an example of our data frame or database, and we want to see how we can automatically remove the missing values, or how we can handle the missing values in this example. Now there's the specific function in Pandas that's called. So we're gonna first call our data frame, and that function is called drop_na. So data frame or df.drop_na, and if you run that, what it does is basically removing all the rows that has at least one missing value in it. And you can see that the only row that has no missing value is the second row, and that would give us only the second row, because the other rows they have at least one NAT or NAN, or at least one missing value in their in any of the columns in those rows. So that's one way of removing the missing values or handling the missing values. There are other ways that you can do that, and there are specifically other options. If you're specifically working on a big data frame or database. Now this time we're going to show you how if you want to drop the columns that has at least one missing value. So for that, we're going to call the data frame again, data frame or df.dropNA. This time we're going to call it access. And for access, we're going to define columns. So we are telling our data frame or our code to identify those columns that has at least one missing value and remove those from our database. And now if you see, we can only return the first column, which has all correct values. So this is an example of when you want to treat your database by columns instead of rows. And so that gives you that option for handling the missing values in that way as well. There are other ways that and there are other options in this specific function. Now, the next one is if you want to define drop NA and the method, we define the method as how, and we say just show all the data, and that would give us just everything in the data frame. Although we know that there are some missing values in there, but we just want to see how our data frame looks like when we are applying the drop NA to the data frame. Now, for the next one, we're going to try to see if we can define a minimum or a minimum number of variables in each row or in each column, and see if we can define a threshold to remove the missing values in different rows or columns. And for that, we can define again df, and calling df to our data frame. This time we're going to call it df.dropNA, and we will be defining a threshold to remove, for example, let's say removing those rows that at least two or at least one missing value from the database. So you can define the threshold as 1 or 2 or 3. If you define it as 2, it says the code to identify those rows that has at least 2 missing values and only remove those rows. And you can see that only the first row has 2 missing values, and in this case, if you define the threshold as 2, it can only remove the first row here, and it returns the other 2 rows. Although we have a non-value in the third row, but since we define the threshold as 2, it still can show it in our data frame. Now the next step, there's one more option that I wanted to show you here, and that's you can also define, or let me show you how it works. Define or call data frame, again drop NA, and this time we will actually want to show a subset or just include a specific subset of our data and just scan that subsets for any missing values and see if there is any missing values. We're gonna just remove the rows based on scanning that specific subset. So in this second case, in this specific example, we're gonna define the subsets as vehicles and location, or the 2 columns here that's called vehicle and location, and we are calling, this is actually our original data frame. So when we only scan the original data frame for non-values, we can see that there's only one non-value under location, and that's for the first row. And that's exactly what the code does here. It only removes the first row, and it can show the other two rows. Although, again, there is another non-value under subset of time. But since we didn't define that a specific subset for dropping the non-values, it did not exclude that from the database or our data frame. This is specifically useful when you are focusing on a specific parts of your data or database, and you want to only uh, focus on specific columns or subsets of data in a big data frame or a data table. And I believe I'm going to show you one more option here um, for for the drop NA, and that's again calling data frame drop NA, and this time we will be um, just recall those that are um, in place, and we call it just return those that are true. That means that this will return only the rows that has all values and they don't have any missing value. So if there is any missing value, either one or two or three, or any other threshold that we defined before, this will not apply any threshold. It just scans all the rows and see if there is any missing value. It will completely remove that row from the data. And if you can look at our original database, it is pretty similar to the very first option that we showed, drop NA, just without any specific options in it. And this will probably do the same for your data, but it depends. In some cases, it might give you a different answer. Again, it depends on the type of data that you have. Okay, that's it for this tutorial, and I will see you again in another video.